Welcome to Adjusted Reality, a podcast series trusted by the adjusted and brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, where we learn from athletes, celebrities, influencers, and healthcare professionals about how to optimize health in a fun, relatable way. Join me, Dr. Sherry McAllister, as we welcome long distance fell runner, small animal vet, and research scientist Jasmin Paris. Jasmin was launched into the media spotlight in January 2019 when she won the 268-mile Montane Spine race outright, breaking the overall record by 12 hours and beating her nearest rival by 15 hours. This year, she became the first woman to finish the infamous Barkley Marathon in Tennessee, something many had previously considered, well, impossible for a woman. I am so delighted to have such an amazing woman with me today. Welcome to Adjusted Reality, Jasmin.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, it's across the pond for her. She's in Scotland and I'm in California. So I'm delighted that she would share her evening with me. And there's so many questions, but for the listeners who are not aware, first you got to get a little bit of a vocabulary update because many of you will never have heard of a fell runner. And I'd also like to bring up that she is a sky runner too. So, Jasmine, I'm first going to ask you, would you give our audience a little bit of information regarding what is a sky runner, what is a fell runner, and how does this all come together for you as a general runner?
Yeah, I guess I think of myself in at heart as a fell runner. That's why I started, and that's I think I'm sure what I'll always come back to. And in some ways it's kind of unique to the UK. I think largely because you have quite a lot of hills and moorland that is fairly easy to run across in the sense that there's not kind of dangerous cliffs and things. And basically, fell running is sort of running between points, racing between points when you're doing races, without a trail, so you're kind of navigating your way across the landscape in races. It's very, I guess, started very traditionally with sort of local shows, and people would run up the local hill, and then I think progress from there. So it's basically sort of a bit like trail running, but wilder because you have to be able to navigate, and you kind of make your way through the landscape via the kind of fastest possible routes, but not always the shortest way, obviously. So yeah, I'm a fell runner, and sky running is, I would say, kind of more across the world now, and it's in some ways it's very similar. There's fell races that are very much like sky races here in the UK. There's such fell races, but basically sky running is it tends to be quite technical, quite exposed. Often you'll be running along a ridge, and that's why it's called sky. I think sky running because you're kind of touching the sky, I guess. Yeah, so you get these kind of fantastic shots, especially the runners running along kind of spiky ridges, and yeah, and lots of mountains are obviously involved.
It's breathtaking and it's so energizing to see that I understand ultra marathons, and we've had some pretty interesting ones on Adjusted Reality, but you're the first woman that I've talked to who breaks her own trail. And I love that, not only literally, but metaphorically as well. I mean, you have now set a trail that few have ever achieved. And I want to go into that because if you're not inspired, check your pulse. Okay, I'm going to tell you something about this woman that will blow your socks off. The Barkley Marathon race is widely regarded as the world's toughest ultra marathon. It's been completed by only 20 people in the last 35 years. So take a breath right there. Now, it's consisting of 5 20-mile loops through the wilderness of Frozen Head State Park in Tennessee, with more than 2 times the climb that you would do if you were doing Everest. The race has a 60-hour time limit. I don't know a lot of people that can do Everest, but let alone do it twice. So now I have the question for you, Jasmin. I want to start where that's the end as of like a few months back. And I'm so grateful that you have taken time out of your incredibly busy schedule, being a mom of two beautiful children, a vet of cats and dogs, an internal specialist with them. And then on top of this, all of this running. And let's start with I just need to peek inside Jasmin's brain for a minute. How did this start? And I know you started in 2008, kind of getting once you got your vet degree, but let's go back when you were a little girl. Did you run as a little girl? And if so, what were some of the fondest memories? No, no running as a child?
I mean, I think I tell everybody, I think I really came into fell running from hiking across the hills. So we did spent a lot of time outside with my parents as a small child, hiking and wild camping and things. And I guess it was a natural progression from that. I just really enjoyed being on the hills in wild places. And once I started working, it was a way of getting into the hills every day and being able to, before work, even getting out into the hills and spending an hour or so out there in wild places. So, yeah, that was the way that I came into it, more as a kind of hill walker and then progressed that way. But I guess I always did I was fairly active and always did bits of running and things. So.
It's so nice to know that you don't have to start out as a 5-year-old like when you watch the Olympics is they usually start before they can even walk. They're already doing the sport. So it's so nice to kind of hear someone like you who's turned into an incredible and you started out just loving going out in nature and bless your parents for ensuring that you had that nature experience because you now will pass it on to your kids with inevitable progress that will be made is both your children, I'm sure they've come to understand that mom's gone on a run. And for most children, that's an hour. For yours, that could be 8 to 10 hours in your training. So I want to now go to you had this race that I want to talk about because Barkley's, it's pretty epic. And this race was actually, and I want our audience to know what tenacity means. This was your third attempt. And I love that piece because the first time and the second time built you to who you are today. So let's start with the first time. What did you learn? And then the second time, why did you make yourself do it for the third time?
I think the first time I went, I didn't really know. Oh, I just didn't know what to expect. Because the event is sort of shrouded in secrecy. That's part of what makes it kind of special. And that's why it's kind of so magical. That's why there's so much appeal to it. And that's why people get so excited trying to follow it, via the limited kind of social media methods of kind of seeing what's going on. So this thing is secrecy, but that also means that it's very difficult to kind of really gauge what it's all about and how hard it is. All you know is the kind of the rate of finishes, which is exceedingly low. So the first time I went there and with an open mind, ready to, I guess I was prepared that it might be that I came away saying this is impossible for me, but I didn't. I came away thinking that's really hard, but I think it's doable. So after
Oh,
once I kind of developed, once I had that knowledge, I guess it was inevitable that I was going to want to go back and try and get it done. So the second year so the first year I did the 3 loops, which is and just managed to do it in 40 hours, which is a fun run. It's a funny name for an experience that's
right.
challenging in
I'm sure
itself.
you had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then there's the second year. So the second year I went back. I'd had some kind of challenges before that, just kind of low grade fatigue. I think just the challenge of being a mum and having small children and having had COVID and things. So training wasn't perfect, and then I had a knee injury as well. In fact, at one point I was told, basically if I wanted to continue running, then run on soft surfaces and don't do anything too undulating. So that kind of if Barkley is anything but not undulating, isn't it? So it's about as undulating as you get. So yeah, there were some challenges in the lead up to the second time, but when I got there, the conditions were incredible. And I managed 3 loops this time, the fun run in a much faster time. So I was back in time to go out for the fourth loop, which I completed, but over time, so it didn't officially count. But I guess, coming away from that, I still had this belief that it was possible. I just needed to be in the right, I needed to be fit at the same time as the conditions were good. And then this year it just all came together. I was lucky, the conditions were good, the weather was good, I felt fit. And I don't know, it's just weird. I had this real sort of sense of belief this year going there that I could do it. it's hard to explain to people. Like I just something inside me like really believed it was possible. And I think in some ways it was that like kind of that self-belief, that confidence, that sort of that trust in myself in what I was capable of. That was, I think, what got me to the end, because it wasn't the perfect race, or the perfect run by any means. I suffered quite a lot at times, and I think other people that were there watching would have said that it was a lot about perseverance, and it was the fact that I didn't give up and get kind of just kept my head down and refused to give up, even when at the last few hours, and the time that in terms of what the time that I reached the last kind of point where anybody can see your progress, the fire tower, it looked like how it was impossible for me to finish, I think, based on the kind of previous finishers splits for that section. But I just managed to do it. So I think it was all came down to the fact that I refused to give up, and that I had this odd kind of sense of myself and self-belief that I could do it.
When you dive into that sense of self, because I just, the odds were actually against you at the very end as you saw the fire tower. You actually know how much time you have. You have 60 hours, and you had to dig deep and say to yourself, I'm going to hit that gate at 59 hours, 58 minutes. I mean, did you know you were at that close? Did you have an idea that you were that close?
I thought I was going to have a bit more. I thought I was going to have like 10 minutes in my head, maybe five, but I didn't think it was going to go that close.
Is that
Yeah,
crazy?
I thought it was going to be more like 5 to 10.
It
So that was pretty. It was really hard at the end. It was that bit. I sort of still shudder a little bit when I remember what it felt like, to that sudden realization, because I think until oddly, despite the fact that, as I say, the time was stacked against me, I didn't, and I really believed that I could do it all the time until that final sort of kilometer or so, when I was in the valley and just had to run that last little bit up to the gate. And that's when I suddenly started to question whether it was going to be possible, because I was so close to the cutoff. And I suddenly realized how close it was going to be. And everything in me was screaming at me to stop. So I think, yeah, that was the really hard bit, because at that point, I suddenly wasn't sure anymore. There was like a wavering of the belief that this was going to happen, and suddenly the enormity of the idea that after all this effort and all this kind of, yeah, this struggle, that I might just get there a few seconds over time, and then, yeah, the
oh,
enormity of what that would mean in terms of having to go back and do it all again
you
at
would
that
have
moment.
done it again, wouldn't you? You
I
would
would have
not.
done. I would have
Yeah,
gone
I
back. Yeah.
I sense it. I can see it in your eyes. I know exactly this girl is not giving up. And I love the depth that you had to go through to get to that finish line, because for many of us, we hit those hard spots, and we do have to have that inner voice that is going to talk to us, that is going to tell us, and we have to do this ourselves. We can't depend on anybody. And I would think, Jasmin, you would probably say there's no one that could have done it for you. And there's no one that could have encouraged you other than yourself to get through just those last 3 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like I was doing it for myself. I think actually Laz said beforehand that if a woman's going to finish this, I think she's going to want to she's going to be doing it because she wants to do it for herself. And in some ways, you know, people afterwards, as kind of asked about the question of finishing it for women, and I was really delighted that I did finish it and kind of prove that a woman could do it, and for women across the world. But I admitted, like, I was quite freely afterwards, that I went there to do it for me. It was something that I wanted to do, just because I believed that it was possible, and I wanted to prove it to myself. And it wasn't really about proving it to anybody else. It was a personal challenge, and I think ultimately that if you're going to put yourself in such a, like, if you're going to dig so deep and kind of put yourself so far into the red zone, then it has to come from the fact that you really want it. You can't be doing it, yeah. I think you just have to really want it. So
Well
um
said. You really do. Anything worth having in life, you have to taste it. Like, you have to have the passion and the desire and really the creativeness, because I was listening to some of your training runs, which are just to me, they're extraordinary because you're a mother. You have two young children. Thankfully, you have a girl and a boy, so you got a great balance to bring them both up with this really strong mental attitude. But I was thinking to myself, you have to be creative because you're on a race where, you have to navigate intellectually on how you're going to get there. You have to ensure that you've trained the terrain, right?
Yeah.
So that you're willing to take on some of the crazy moments that are going to happen. And if you look back over the time, what were some of the trainings that made you really know that you could do it? Because I really want my audience to really get into the meat and potatoes here, because this is not your average training. So tell us about some of the fun moments that you had in your training up to Barkley.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of the bread and butter of it is just the consistency of training throughout the winter, putting in, an hour and a half during the week and then long runs at weekends. And often I was doing kind of double sessions, so a second session in the evening on just managing to squeeze it in before getting my son from nursery. For example, like 1,000 meters on the stair climber in the gym as the second session of the day. The kind of most memorable kind of long runs, I guess, were there was one run when we were away on kind of up north for a week over half term in February, and I just ran up the kind of local big mountain 5 times in a row, which I think surprised some walkers that thought they'd got an early start, and there I was popping past them for the third time as they walked up. So that was about 4,000 meters of ascent. And then probably the most memorable one run though was quite close to home. There's a local hill. It's about 300 meters. And I knew that I wanted to do somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 meters of climbing. And I knew that I needed to do, I can't remember what it was, like 25 miles or something in that time. So to get that sort of ascent, I knew that it was going to take quite a long time. So I went to bed at 8 o'clock with my son, got up at midnight. And it was really lashing down with rain outside, and it was about 1 degree, so it was just above freezing. And I knew that once you kind of started to climb up, you were going to go through the kind of through into sleet and snow. And the dog looked at me a little bit questioningly, but he's like unfailingly loyal and always wants to go running. So even though it was like 1 a.m., he got out of bed, and my husband did say, my husband who hadn't gone to bed yet did actually say, "You're not going out on this, are you?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I said, "I'll see you at the swimming pool," because every Saturday I take the kids swimming at 10:30. Whenever we're here and we're not away, it's like it's a thing that we do together. So I said, "I'll see you there." And yeah, I went out and did, I can't remember, it was like 8.5 hours or something of climbing up and down this hill. And it really was kind of, you go from lashing rain into sleet and then snow. And it was a real blizzard it was real blizzard on the hill.
That's epic.
But, me and the dog just kind of, he's so good though. He just sort of finds me, and he's just a real hill dog. I don't have to worry about him at all. But the funny thing was, because the snow was kind of so wet and it was really slippy. So and it was the slope that was on, there was no path on it. It was pretty steep. And so every time I started going down, I'd fall over. So in the end, I just sat down and sledged down on my bottom on my waterproof trousers. So I did essentially, I like to think that I did 5 hours or something of sledging in the middle of the night. And then climbing back up again. I think I climbed the hill 17 times. And then I met them at the swimming pool. I actually managed to get in 20 minutes in the sauna, I think, to warm up before they arrived.
Well done. Well done.
Yeah, so it was kind of, yeah, that was my night of running up and down the hill in a blizzard. But yeah, my water bottle was free, there's ice forming in the water
For
bottle when I
sure.
was in
You're getting your fill, but it was with icicles as well as just the plain liquid water. I love the story because it really does show that you're having fun. Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, everybody who's not a runner might think that's just kind of like crazy, but if you're a runner, that's fun. It's like,
Yeah, and
let's get dirty, let's push the envelope, let's just like be a kid again.
yeah, absolutely. And then it stopped snowing, and then the sunrise was incredible, and the whole the hill had turned white because it got much colder. The temperature dropped, and it was just one of those fantastic mornings. And you think it's such a privilege to be out here at sunrise and see this white landscape, the way it's transformed. Yeah, and also then you're left. A lot of doing these big challenges, things like Barkley, is actually about the kind of there's a real pleasure in the training, in the process as well. It's like that's part of the adventure, you know. Sometimes it's almost a little bit sad when it's all over because um it's fun sort of settling in and not having your distractions and really getting your head down and focusing on something and really working hard at it. I find that like satisfying. And so this run was just another example of that. And you know, when you then take the kids swimming and they're playing and things, then you get out and you go home for lunch and things, and you've got that like it's like this nice thing to look back on. It's like this little sort of warm nugget that you can, you know, this little secret to yourself when you look around the swimming pool and you've, you know, kind of had this huge adventure in the night. And
And
you
everybody's just sipping their coffee at the swim meet. And you're like,
yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
slugged it out. That's good for that is so fun. And we got to give a call out to your dog. What kind of dog do you have? And how long did this dog go? Did he go the whole distance with you?
Oh yeah, you know, my husband's a runner, and the dog often comes back and goes straight back out with my husband again.
Oh,
So
wow.
he does like double the training. He's a border collie, so he's like he's made
He's built
to
for
do,
this for
yeah.
sure. Well, I too share your experience. We have a Doberman, and I'll tell you what, he just walks. We're running and he's walking. He's like, "Can we go a little faster?" And they do. They get to a point where they kind of look at you like, "Okay, you're done, but I'm not."
Yeah, I know he's
So
fantastic.
that's a really special moment. And I want to ask you because it is a juggle for you being that you're trying to manage everything in there, but how you had a bit there where the body was just fatigued and you took some time off, which I just thought was wonderful because so many of us try to push through, like pushing through for Barclays to finish the race. That's one thing, but pushing through the intensity of just constant fatigue, that's separate. When
Yeah.
you finish your runs, what are some of the fun things you like to do to recover?
I mean, now especially, it's like it's essentially it's just being with the children. Like I have no greater pleasure than just being with them and watching them play. And you know, I guess they're at an age still where they're very happy to, you know, the simple things still make them very excited. So it's just, you know, you just got to set the scene and they and play and you know you can actually just sit in the sunshine and watch. That's like my ideal scenario is if we're out somewhere in nature and they're playing.
Oh, that's brilliant.
You know,
I love
that's
that. So
that'll be
you're
my
balancing
first.
your mental health with your physical well-being. Is there food that causes you to feel like it really does help you recover to get back out there for the next weekend?
You know, I guess I think you know it's not. I don't think it's complicated. I mean, we just as a family, like we've always just, I think of just my upbringing, we've always just kind of eaten home cooked food that we make from scratch using, you know, not processed food. And now and more, we're kind of eating much more plant-based. I always ate just a lot of vegetables and a pretty, you know, kind of healthy diet, I think, just naturally because I enjoy that more. But we kind of definitely have moved to more of a plant-based diet just because of the kind of concerns over the environment and reducing the carbon footprint of our family diet. So yeah, so it's just kind of generally lots of fresh vegetables and yeah, home cooked and from scratch. And it's not complicated stuff, but it's just I think it's you know it's you know what's in it. We've got a vegetable patch now as well, so in the it's a little bit of a challenge to keep up with it when we kind of both working. But
Oh, for
yeah, we get
sure.
all the salad straight from the garden now. So yeah, and we've lots of fresh you know strawberries, raspberries, and all that stuff now. Potatoes we're eating tonight from the garden. So yeah, that I'm very much.
Brilliant. Good job. Well, it does make life better when we can just get simpler. And I love that, you do balance the mental and physical because I think with this type of activity, there is the toughness that comes with mental and knowing when. And then there's the physical where you have to look at your body and say, can I? Should I? And that's a balance for many of us out there today that we kind of start thinking about stability. What is our best plans? Because you said, you've had knee injuries, you've had things that you've had to work through and get stronger by. But as you noted over the course of training and kind of getting the race set in your mind, tell me, did you ever in your wildest dreams think that running would provide an avenue for you to get to this next step, which I want everybody to know she is a co-founder of the Green Runners, which I think is really a fabulous organization. Did that ever, like in the past, did you think you would get here in your wildest dreams from years previous? And then tell us a little bit about the Green Runners.
I guess I never really like I still find it a little bit bewildering the fact that I guess you could say that in running terms I'm famous. Because
Oh,
I
you
just
are.
feel like a
Absorb
normal
it, Jasmine.
person. So yeah, I find it a little bit odd to think that. So you're right, I wouldn't have thought that I would, because I guess that's the reason that I have this platform with which to speak out about the Green Runners, for example. And that's part of the reason I guess I met the people and to get involved with the Green Runners. So you're right, I was one of the co-founders, and I guess we were just a group of runners that came together after COP26, the climate conference, just feeling that we wanted to try and do more. We wanted to like somehow put that kind of frustration, the need for action on climate change, and try and do something within the community that we were in. And at that point, I already had, a reasonably big following on kind of social media. And I actually shortly after that stepped away from the brand that I guess I was kind of sponsored by an ambassador for the kind of clothing and shoe brand, just because I wanted to use my voice to kind of speak out about what I thought was important. And so, that's apart from the fact that I'm delighted to kind of, I guess, be viewed as somewhat as a representative of, women and sport and girls running and kind of participation. I think that's fantastic. But I also like to speak out about about what we can do as a running community to lessen our carbon footprint. So very basically, the Green Runners is based around 4 pillars, thinking about how you move, and that's generally moving, fly, travel to races. How you fuel, that's what you're putting into your body in terms of food and drink and so on. How you kit up. So for me, that was kind of moving away from having a sponsor and really trying to repair kit and recycle it and get, maybe if I need to buy new kit, buy it secondhand, and sort of using my platform to kind of spread that message that you can try and make things last as long as possible. And then finally how you speak out. So I guess that's how I'm using this setting
Well,
to
you're
mention.
doing a fine job of your 4 pillars. I'm sure there's lots of people out there like, I'll take her secondhand. I hope they have spirited inspiration in them. Jasmine, let me ask you this. There's a lot of people out there in variety of athletic capabilities. Some may be really struggling mentally and or physically. I want to take the time to just add 2 questions for you. I want you to share with us the wisdom because you've really gone through some mental and physical preparedness. I want you to tell our audience something that they could tuck away in let's say their pocket as they go through whatever they're going through. I want you to, in one pocket, I want to say this is a piece that I want to share with you about the wisdom of the good times and how you can embrace that. Like, you lay down at that gate and you said, yes, I did it. I want you to give us some wisdom about when you had your moment of, I don't know if I can do this. And let's tuck it in the next pocket so that my listeners today, as they adjust their reality, they can take the wisdom from both pockets when they're appropriate. So let's start with the good pocket. What did you embrace? What is the wisdom that you would tell people to embrace when the great moments are happening?
I think people often kind of ask what the secret is, and that wanting to kind of glean some, like I've got some magic wisdom that I guess like a little bit like you're asking about how I've done what I've done and so on. And I sort of mentioned self-belief and kind of stubbornness, which I think makes a big difference. But a lot of it comes back to the fact that I love running. I love being in the wild places. I love being in nature. And I think if you can like keep that joy in something that you're doing, and like even when you're doing something that's really hard, like even when I was doing Barkley, I still had that, that joy of being out there in the wilderness and doing something ultimately that I chose to do that I love. And I'll just give you an example. So like during during that final loop, there was this moment and I was really rushing, and it's kind of all the time you're thinking about every second that the clock's ticking. But there's this moment where I suddenly like, it was really odd. Like I suddenly just came back to the present of the moment that I was in the woods. And for a second I was just like still and I could like feel the wood around me. Suddenly like because you're so focused and you're so thinking about every last like the next letter and things. But for that moment I was like back to where I was maybe when like I was in my early 20s and we did a lot of hiking and you have a lot more time to like be in the like to kind of connect with the environment that you're in. If you're hiking slowly over the mountains, if you do something like Barkley, you're totally focused on the next thing and you don't have as much of those moments. But there was just a moment in Barkley on the fifth loop, as I say, when I was on a summit and it was drizzling a bit and I can still feel the water on my skin and like and the sense of the kind of the smell the wet leaves and like hear the forest around me. And suddenly it was like it was all okay. It was just like it just brought me back into that moment and made me realize, like you're here in the forest. It's like, it's okay. This is like, it just made me feel at peace. So I don't really know where you want to put that, but
Oh, I
I get,
think that is a beautiful rendition of the ability for you to go through the tough times. That's kind of like the tough times bring you back to you got to find your joy. You got to ask yourself why you're doing it, and you found it. Like that beautiful vision you just gave of the water just gently flowing onto your skin, in that moment where you just realized, I've been here before. And it was okay. It was in my 20s and I was hiking and it was beautiful. I'm at peace. I think you kind of nailed both pockets all in one. Now I know
yeah,
I
yeah.
was so tough for you because it was good and bad.
So yeah, so exactly, yeah. Well, maybe then I'll just use that answer and even like subsequently I still I was still seeing the flashes. The Berkeley forest is quite brown at that time of year, but occasionally there was quite a few butterflies and like all through my childhood the butterflies I think my dad always pointed out and there'd be these flashes of color and I find myself looking at the butterflies that flew past and I don't know if I'm assuming other runners noticed that as well, but for me those moments really stood out when so like I say, the kind of the colours there, the magic is there. It's just sometimes you just need to remember it and look for it. Yeah. So
That's a beautiful statement. The magic is always there. The question is, are you seeing it? Because sometimes we can just speed through life and you don't see it anymore. I have to end with this last question. I know it's like a bonus question, but you have a race coming up in September. Can you just share a little bit about it? And hopefully our listeners can follow you through that.
hopefully I won't let them down then if they're going to be following me. It's the Tour de Géant. So it's a race in Italy and around the Aosta Valley. So it starts from Coimeo, which is just on the back side of Mont Blanc, at the Italian side, and it runs a big loop around the valley. It's another one of these kind of non-stop races, so you don't sleep very much because you're trying to stay ahead. And it's about, I think it's 330 kilometers with about 24,000 meters of climbing. So, um, yeah, it's
Good
going to be
for
a challenge. It's going to
you.
be
Good for
fun.
you. Okay, we're rooting for you. We know that there'll be plenty of butterflies out there for you. Jasmin, what a treat. It is an absolute pleasure for you to have you on our show today and to really just have someone who has such beauty in them and wisdom and inspiration and most of all, as you said it, stubbornness. Join our show today on Adjusted Reality. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Well, there you have it. I want to thank you for tuning into Adjusted Reality as we spoke to Jasmin Paris about the journey of becoming the first woman to complete the Barkley's Marathon. I got to tell you, she adjusted my reality. I just coming back to when things get hard, look for the butterflies. It's so beautiful to stop sometimes and think, why am I doing this? It doesn't have to be an athletic adventure. It could be the work that you're in right now. Why are you doing it? Do you see those butterflies in the job that you're doing? And if you don't, well, you know what Adjusted Reality would say. It's time to take a look, be inspired, be passionate about what you do because, well, this is not a rehearsal. This is your life. This is how you live it. And that's why we bring inspirational people like Jasmin to the table. And it's really about the stability of life, which chiropractic has always been there for the balance, how you keep yourself moving, how you keep yourself grooving. And I think as we move forward and you start living the life that you design, and it is strong, inspired, and as Jasmin would say, you have to be a little stubborn to get what you want when you want it. I think it really does help us all grow because we do grow through what we go through. And to be the first woman to ever accomplish a race that they said was virtually impossible is pretty epic. Well, I want to thank you. Speaking of epic, it's you, audience, that makes our podcast continue to grow. And it's always brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress. Now, as our special gift for listening today, you can visit f4cp.org/health, and you can get a copy of our complete health. It includes mind, body, and spirit. And that, of course, is what you would need if, in fact, you were going to take on a Barkley Ultra Marathon. But don't forget to subscribe. Share this podcast with your friends and your family, or anyone that you think needs to be inspired. Rate and review. If you're feeling inspired to learn more about chiropractic, or you'd like to find a chiropractor near you, you can visit f4cp.org/find-a-doctor. Listen, we're so grateful for the support and for you continuing to come back episode after episode and helping us grow every single episode. So I really, truly look forward to having you join us again very soon.